Hello everyone. I'll show you a game that shows how tricky endgames can be. So I'm playing Anonymous and this is a 10 plus 3 game. So there's enough time for a person who has played Bullet and Bleeds only. So let's just dive right in. E4 and C5, the Sicilian, and F4, and I'm already out of my opening prep. So I just go knight to C6, knight to F3, and d4, trying to break his center. And he pushes e5, and I try to break the center again with f6. And he plays bishop to b5, and f takes e5, bishop takes c6, b takes c6, knight takes e5, and queen to d6 because I have to protect this pawn, and also this check is coming, so I have to keep g6 ready. So without the queen, if I play g6, then knight takes, and I can't take because of this attack. So keeping all that in mind, I played queen to d6, castles, and knight to f6. Now my idea is to take the bishop out, then play e6, then bishop to e7, and castle. So that's what I have planned, and as I do most of the time, regardless of what he does, I'm going to execute my plan. So knight to c3 and bishop to f5, d3 and e6, bishop to e7, queen to f3 and castle. So at this point I am up a minute on the clock and the position is equal. But after this he takes some time and plays g4, really asking what I'm going to do with my bishop. So this is the first time I take some time in the game, and I just don't want to lose my bishop here, but there is nowhere I can go. So after thinking a lot, I decided to play what the only move in this position is: bishop to g6, knight takes, which was not recommended by engine because this knight here is a monster, and to kick it away I'll have to play knight to d7 or something, which is kind of passive. But he just takes and I take, and now he pushes g5, which makes me think that I am winning because the next move, knight to h5, comes with an attack on the pawn, which is pinned to the queen because of this rook. But regardless of all that, this pawn is sufficiently defended at this, not at this time, but the next move it will be. So knight to e2, defending the pawn, and as soon as I see things like bishop takes g5, I'll just play it. There is no chance I will not play that and play c5, c4, trying to, I'll just take, and here I'm feeling like I'm winning. I'm just feeling it for no reason. It's completely equal 0.0, but I'm feeling like I'm winning because I'm not an engine. Okay, next move is queen to g4 and bishop to h6, the only move. Queen takes g6, knight takes, and on the f4 square we have bishop takes f4, bishop takes f4, knight takes f4, rook takes f4, rook takes f4, and queen takes. So a lot of stuff happening on the f4 square. Now if we had played queen takes e6 with check, it was an absolute draw because, or maybe not, because at this level even completely drawn games can go in any side, but at least it looks like that because he can play queen takes e6 with check, and then the pawns are equal and his pawn structure is better, so probably I would lose. But he plays rook to f1, attacking my queen, but at the same time giving me some chance, and it is minus 2.5 now, and I don't miss the chance. I just play queen to e3 check, which is obvious, king to h1, and a rook to f8. Both the engine moves. I'm doing great here. And I was thinking he would take and I would take, and then the queen being so close to the king, it would be hard for me to win. But he plays a good move, which is rook to g1, threatening mate here. I had a few options that I was considering. First one was going here or here just to defend the square, but I knew that that was too passive, so I did not do that. Played another angel move, queen to f3 with check. Queen blocks with queen to g2, and here the engine says I can just take and it's minus 2.7 and winning. But I did not take because I thought if I take and he takes, then the rook is nicely defending all these pawns, and with these double pawns and the king back here, the rook here, it would be drawish. So I did not take and went rook to f7. It does add another defender to the g7 square, and his queen is pinned, so also I'm planning to take with the rook. If he takes, my rook would be active, so I'm doing things on my terms. So he was h4 here, and I thought he is weakening his king somewhat, and I was considering this queen to f6. But after queen to f6, my whole plan would be to go after this pawn, and I would do some bad stuff there. Maybe I would hang a mate, I don't know. But for all that reasons, I went rook to f4. Notice this queen is still pinned to the king, so this cannot be a mate, cannot be played. So he takes, because at this point he was experiencing pressures. I took, and he plays rook to g2, and again I was considering a rook to h3 with check, and if he did not block with the rook, then I would win the pawn. But 99% chance that he would block. I did not play that. It was never in my mind to trade rooks here, but actually trading rooks wins. So I go pawn to e5, and the advantage is slightly reduced, and it is around -1. It's like I'm up a pawn. That is not great because it can go drawish anyway. And he plays king to h2, and at this point I made an inaccuracy, and I play pawn to e4, thinking if it takes, then I take and I would create a passive. But actually it's a common thing if you don't know much about pawn endgames. So if he takes and I take, then just rook to e2, and the pawn is not going anywhere. And if I play pawn here, then king here, and I'm losing the pawn. And if I play here, then it's actually white who is winning the game with king here, and then rook goes somewhere, he takes the pawn, and pretty active position and equal pawns, but mine are doubled up, so he would win. So I did not want all that, but he did not take and he offered a rook exchange. So both of us are not knowing much about pawn end games, rook and pawn end games. So he offers a rook exchange, thinking if I take and he takes, his king will enter the game and stop my pawns. But actually the best move is to allow the king to come closer to the center, because I can play e3, and wherever the king goes I will play d4 and get this nice chain, and one pawn being a protected passer, just two squares away from promotion, completely winning, because the king would be locked around this position, and I would go and win this pawn, and then all of these pawns would be nice, eating all the pawns. But I don't take. I had this idea, this all going here and then here, locking the pawn in the center and winning the game. But I don't take. But at the same time, I don't give away the advantage. I just give a check, and he blocks again. And this time I take, and then I go with all the idea. And here it's -7.2. I'm completely winning. There's nothing he can do whatsoever. So he tries to break my pawn chain with c3. If I take, then he first takes here, and then whatever I play, let's say king h7, then he takes this pawn, and the position would be equal. But I don't have to do that, because if he takes here, then I would take here, and again I have protected passive. So I just go king to h7, and now I'm just not looking at all of these squares. I'm just limited on this side of the board. for this time because I am relaxed, I'm chilling, I have a nice protected passer here, and I'm feeling I'm completely winning. So I just keep going towards that pawn. He tries to break again, and I just don't blindly go king to h5 because that again would not blunder the game at all. Because if I go here and he takes again, these pawns are not going anywhere, and I will take here. If he takes, I have this pawn to keep the king around it because once the king goes somewhere else, my pawn promotes. So I'm just eating all the pawns, enjoying. But all of that does not happen. I just take, and the engine says it was even better to take here, but I take there, and it's again the same advantage. He takes, and then I take, and he takes. And at this point, if you see, I have a passer here, which is restricting the king from leaving this area. My king is close to winning another pawn. I'm already up a pawn, and all of this that I thought was correct. But the only thing in the position that I missed is that my c pawn is overloaded. I thought this pawn is nicely stopping this pawn from going anywhere, and this pawn is nicely stopping this pawn from going anywhere. But the problem is that he can he can just take advantage of this pawn being here, being overload. But it's still minus 10.9 if I play correct moves. And I play another correct move, king to h5, and he plays a good move, king to d, pawn to d4. I take again the engine move, and it's minus 60.2. If you know what that means, it's completely winning for me. There is no chance I'm losing this according to the engine and according to me at that time when I was playing. But he goes king to d3, and at this point disaster happens. I see this open file for my pawn. I see there's nothing that can come and stop the pawn, and I just play g5, and from minus 60 it's plus 9.4. And you know what I was saying, this pawn can go here, and if I go here, then this pawn just, then he does not need to do that. This pawn comes, and if I take, this pawn queens. And if after if after this I take here, then again this pawn queens. So from completely winning to completely losing, I'm just back what I always do. So this shows how tricky endgames can be. But the good thing is, after this g5 disaster from me, he does not play b5. He does not take advantage of the pawn being overloaded. And it's minus 71.6 again. And g4, nice move. I'm winning. He was king to d2, and I go king to g3. Disaster strikes again. But at this time, it's zero point 0. It's draw because even if this pawn is overloaded and he can get a queen, I can play king here and get my queen at the same time. So it's a draw. But again, he does not play all that, and it's minus 60 again. I just play the engine move. He plays what the engine was screaming that he should have played some 2 to 3 moves ago. But he plays it now, but chess is just brutal. Now he gets a passer, but the king is here instead of here. And if you remember the square rule, my king is inside the square, my king is catching you. So the same happens. I have 3 pawns, and at this time I'm just chilling with 56 seconds on the clock. I'm and I don't even give up that pawn. My idea is to make 3 knights here and checkmate, but after this he resigns. So hope you saw how tricky endgames can be. if you don't know all the principles of rook and pawn endgames and pawn endgames. So that's all for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again.
Roll it, my girl. So let me say you roll it, my girl. You love it when you bend and fold it. Now let me roll it and let me own it, my girl. You want the style that I have mastered. I say what, baby girl, that's my word. Give me the good loving.